Hello Summoners and welcome back to another episode of ProGuides Best Champions in Main, now in patch 11.14. The champions that we pick for this series are strong picks with high performance but have low ban rates, and they're very unlikely to be nerfed anytime soon. They are reliable picks for climbing and are worth investing your time in. We also have a series that covers most broken, contested picks in each role, so be sure that you're subbed to the channel so you don't miss out when we post those as well. We'll be starting things off in the top lane with Garen. Being that Garen is already in a pretty solid state at the moment, it's a bit weird that Riot is randomly buffing him. I get that he suffers in certain matchups from the Stridebreaker losing its dash, but that's kind of the point of the mobility nerf that Riot put out, or so I thought. The whole idea is that so much mobility being on items was deleting certain counterplay. Let's just talk about why this is such a ridiculous move by the team. Garen is a juggernaut, and like every juggernaut, that means he does quite a lot of damage and is really tanky, but is supposed to be gated by somewhat low mobility. This means that this one weakness is being kited. Prior to Season 11, it's not like Garen was bad. In fact, he was consistently a solid A-tier pick, good into almost any other top lanes due to his oppressive trading all game. Out of the laning phase, Deadman's play helped him with getting onto the target, but once the momentum passive was spent, he was back to being a bit more kiteable. When Season 11 came along, Garen was obviously one of the biggest Stridebreaker abusers. Having a dash with such a short cooldown meant that he was able to get onto targets again and again with little to no counterplay. With the removal of the Stridebreaker dash, Garen was right back to pre-Season 11 times. Strong damage means that he's more capable of fighting even the best meta top laners, but out of lane, he's at least kiteable. And now, with 11.14, Riot is immediately going back on the ward and giving him more mobility in an attempt to remove counterplay for his opponents. I seriously hope that this isn't a recurring issue. Our second top laner is Warwick. Warwick has been a little bit of a weirdo, like me in high school. In some metas, he's completely unseen, but then, with no buffs at all, he randomly rises to the top and becomes a strong A or even an S tier pick, but that's usually as a jungler. Warwick top is pretty much never considered meta. There have been times where his play rate just goes up a tiny bit, like when people start running barrier, but I consider that more of a cheese pick than meta. But with Divine Sunderer's buff, Warwick is actually strong enough now that I'd say that he's actually a real meta pick and can go toe to toe with the best duelists in the role. The reason he's such a good top laner is that he's practically unbeatable in any 1v1 situation. He has good damage and a ridiculous amount of sustain. If the trades that are happening are short and sweet, you'll basically always come out on top thanks to the big chunk of healing on your Q. Usually the answer to the champions with a ton of healing is to burst them down and finish them off before they can actually get offset healing, but Warwick is equipped to deal with that as well. The damage reduction from his E allows you to negate a ton of burst damage, with the Falling Fear allowing you to get a Q in and a couple of autos to heal up a lot of your opponent's damage. So with better short-term and extended trades, there really isn't a lot that most champions can do. Outside of laning phase, Warwick's dueling just gets stronger and stronger, especially since he can build towards items like Spirit Visage and Frozen Heart to really shut down specific damage threats. If you're feeling like you're really playing to split push and have no intentions of grouping up for team fights, you can replace Sterak's Gage with Hullbreaker. Our final top lane pick for this patch is for Cassiopeia. The meta is heavily dominated by bruisers, and mages are considered the worst class in the game. But Cassiopeia's kit is just so good at dealing with meta top laners that she transcends the meta. Her W is a hard counter to the mobility that the strongest picks in the role have. Camille's hookshot, Fiora's lunge, and all of Riven's dashes are rendered completely useless as long as Miasma is available. Early on, Cass is a bit too mana hungry to make use of his aggression, so instead you'll want to farm up and use your W defensively. Once you have Tear and Lost Chapter, you'll have the mana sustain to start going for much more aggressive trades, and eventually the lane reaches the point where you become an oppressive bully. One issue that a lot of mages have that prevents them from being a good top laner is the way that they scale on into the game. Generally, they're built for 5v5 team fights but suck at 1v1s against champions that are meant to duel, such as Fiora and Jax. But with her insanely high DPS and healing, Cassiopeia is much more capable of scrapping with the best of them. That hyper carry DPS, along with her having a grounding effect and potentially a huge AoE stun, makes her a very strong carry in team fights when it's time to group up, but also a great split pusher. If you're tired of being stuck in your current elo, the first step to climbing is fixing your champion pool, and also playing ranked. That's why we make these videos, so you can find the right champion or champs for you. After you decide on what you're gonna play, then you have to learn how to play it right. It can take many hours worth of games to learn that new champion, but you don't have to spend days and weeks doing it alone. Our top tier level coaches are available 24/7, so no matter what time it is, you should at least head over to the site and check it out. Our coaches have grinded the same ladder as you, and now they want to just share their tips and tricks with you. So stop spinning your wheels on your own and get on the fast track for higher elo today. Anyway, let's get back on topic, shall we? Now, taking a look at the jungle, our first pick is Vi. Her scrappy playstyle is great in the current early game meta. Her dueling is so strong that in almost all matchups, you can contest Scuttle Crab as long as the enemy laners don't have a say in it. But if you can't make use of your dueling because of lane interference, that's okay too. Vi has a fast and healthy clear, so you're okay to just farm it out for a bit. If lanes are super pushed up, you have some pretty decent ganks, but mobile champions can be hard to land your Q on. But once you're 6, that doesn't really matter. Vi's ultimate gives you a pretty much guaranteed kill on almost all opponents, so be sure to use it to gank for a laner that will use the lead well. Once it gets to the later stages of the game, you can use your ultimate to make picks on easy to kill champions, or use it to engage a fight by diving through the enemy team to lock up a high priority target. One more bonus that Vi has going for her is how good she is at taking dragons. She's one of the few champions that's really good at soloing the first dragon right as it spawns. Not having to worry about your solo queue teammates already coordinating back timers so you can secure objectives is a big selling point for me. Our second jungler is unfortunately Ivern. If you want map control as a jungler but want to be creeped out by his 90% legs and just his weird ass demeanor, then play Ivern. He has the team fight gameplay of an enchanter, and if that's your thing, then make sure you pick him up. Despite that enchanter identity in fights, Ivern is a pretty decent early game champion. The brute and dash effect from his Q and the slow from his E makes him a really solid skirmisher when you play around your strong early laners. On top of enabling your team, he also does a pretty good amount of damage when you're allowed to throw out your bush empowered autos in a team fight. With his passive allowing you to mark camps and come back for them later, Ivern's clear speed is pretty crazy. Yeah, you have to path through your jungle twice to collect the camps, but all that downtime between gives you a lot of time to pressure the lanes. As the game goes on, your damage falls off, and your goal will be to be as annoying as possible for any would-be backline threats. Between the disruption and the shields that he provides, you should be able to keep your carries alive and well throughout the team fight. Just make sure that you're actually commanding Daisy to hit the right targets. The last jungler that we'll be talking about for today is Zac. His early game is a bit slow compared to some of the faster paced turbo gankers, but that's just cause Zac's E range is pretty small at low ranks. Once you get some points in it, Zac can gank from pretty much any direction. And since it's a basic ability, not an ultimate, his ganks aren't gated by some ridiculously long cooldown. That's what makes him a better jungler than pretty much any other tank. Take somebody like Malphite for example. He has great clear speed, but without his ultimate, he basically does nothing. So each time he presses his R, he has a lot of downtime before he can actually show his face and do something on the map. But with Zac, you can go ahead and repeat gank over and over and tilt the hell out of your enemies. And you know we love mental warfare to win games. One thing I want to know is that you have to build for maximum tankiness, but I personally like to pick up a demonic embrace either before or after Warmox for some extra damage. I usually buy it earlier if I'm already ahead. If you decide to do the same, just cut the last item from this build. Now for the mid lane, we'll be starting off with Lissandra. Lissandra has been the classic go-to pick against Zed forever. Her ultimate basically goes perfectly to counter him, and if he goes for her, she can cancel his ult completely with her own. If he goes for somebody else, she can instantly lock him down and burst him to death. Given that the best meta picks in the mid at the moment are assassins and other melee champions, that same logic applies in almost any matchups that you'll be running into. Whether it's Talon parkouring over a wall, Katarina shenpoing to the perfect spot for an ultimate, or Echo trying to dash in past the front line, Lissandra's R will completely stop them in their tracks. And Liss isn't just good for her CC, she also does a lot of damage. And every spell she has is AoE, so she puts up some really solid damage in team fights. And while she may not be the typical reset champion like Katarina or Yi, her passive does have a little bit of a domino effect to it. It does a lot more damage than most people are ready for, so when you get a takedown and the enemy team chooses to keep fighting on top of you of your frozen thrall, then you'll often very likely get chain kills as a result. Our second mid laner is Rumble. His popularity has fallen because of recent nerfs, but those nerfs were largely aimed at the jungle. He's still a disgustingly strong laner. That strength comes out from his ability to shove out and out-trade just about any opponent that he lanes against. With any other laner completely being unable to contest you in lane, you have a lot of priority that you can use for your jungler. This means that you can easily secure Scuttle Crabs, invades, or even coordinated 4-man ganks on the bottom lane. As the game goes on, Rumble by no means falls off. His damage is absolutely ridiculous, and if you can get onto a squishy carry, a full cycle of his basic abilities can be enough to melt them. Literally. And in team fights, his damage output can be quite nuts. Landing Rumble's ultimate is something that even pros sometimes struggle with, but once you master it, it can completely decimate the entire enemy team. As he scrambles to escape the high damage, slowing fire, you and your team can swoop in and finish them off. Our third mid laner for 11.14 is Tryndamere. While he's definitely most popular as a top laner, Tryndamere mid can be a surprisingly strong pick. For one, since most people aren't used to seeing him in that role, you can easily pick up a cheesy kill at level 1 or 2 with a couple of lucky crits every now and then. Just relying on cheese kills wouldn't be enough to make the cut for us. Even if you can't secure an early kill, Tryndamere is just an all-around good pick into some current popular mid laners. There are plenty of rough early lanes for assassins, but usually at level 6, they have all-in potential. This is why mages are so bad right now. Even if they build a 20 plus CS gap on somebody like Zed or Kiana, the second the assassin gets their ultimate, they can farm the mage on cooldown. But with Tryndamere, you never really have to worry about that. Your ultimate completely negates their kill pressure, and you can definitely win the extended trades afterwards. This is all early game focus, but Tryndamere is technically a hyper-skilling split pusher, so the matchup gets worse and worse for the other mid as the game goes on. When they try to match you in the side lane, they're basically powerless to stop you. If they try to poke you out, you can easily heal up on the wave, and if they go for an all-in, you can just kill them. If they try to ignore you and make a play elsewhere, you get their base. It's just a win-win-win for you, aside from the fact that early game might be a little bit difficult. Tryndamere can be a really satisfying champion to play when you start smacking your opponent with those hard-hitting crits. The sound is just music to my ears, also the animation of him just doing overhead swings is kind of dope. But losing against those crits can be incredibly frustrating. It's like being forced to gamble with no say in the matter, and losing the dice roll means losing the lane. And that brings us to today's question of the day. What champion is the most frustrating for you to play against and why? Let us know your answers in the comments down below. Moving things down to the bot lane, our first pick for the carry role is for Miss Fortune. If you like lane dominant playstyle, she's definitely a champion that you should consider. Not only is she strong early, but Miss Fortune is incredibly easy to play, and there's nothing wrong with taking advantage of that. Lower mechanics means less possible mistakes that you can make, and in the long run, that can really make a difference in your climb up the ladder. What makes MF's laning so oppressive is the insane bursts of damage that she does with her love tap passive. If you combine that with a Q that kills a minion, the trading power that you have is huge. Early on, it could be just really solid poke, but once you grab some AD, a single Q can do half a squishy bot laner's HP, and that's just kind of ridiculous. If you really want to go in on that early game damage, you could even buy a serrated Dirk and sit on it until you're ready to upgrade for your collectors later on. You'd think with the easy strong laning phase, Miss Fortune would sort of fall off at some point, but you'd be wrong. While she doesn't have insane auto attack DPS like some other carries, she can win a fight without ever having to auto attack at all. That's thanks to her ultimate. Finding a good angle in a team fight, specifically one where the enemy team is going to be CC'd by your team, or fighting in a choke point, can easily lead you to melting the entire enemy squad before they can escape from your barrage of bullets. Our second ADC is Twitch. He definitely takes a lot more effort to make work when you compare him to Miss Fortune, who you can just play with your brain off, but the potential to carry is also a lot higher. Early game, you'll be really vulnerable against aggressive laners that just want to jump you, but that's also because he's immobile. Twitch's actual damage early game is pretty high, and as long as you have the support that fights with you, you should be winning most 2v2 fights if you get peel from your ally. But preferably, you just have a nice relaxing lane where you can just soak up some farm. The key to making Twitch work isn't killing your laners 2v2. If that happens, it's really nice, but it's not something that you should really expect often. Instead, your goal should be to surprise the enemy mid laner anytime that you get the chance. Every time you reset to base, or if you somehow get the wave shoved in but don't have anything to recall for, you should be looking to roam for mid for a gank. Even in higher elos where mid laners generally have more awareness, these ganks often lead to kills. So if you're playing in plat and under, you should expect this to work almost every single time. As the game goes on, you shift from assassin to hyper carry. And don't get me wrong, you can still pop out of stealth and pick up a kill on an overextended enemy, but why go for one kill when you can just mow down the entire enemy team in a 5v5 to end the game? Our last pick for the bot lane is Swain. If you watch our meta videos regularly, you should know that he's been on our list for a long time as both a bot lane carry and a support. He's just one of those instances of a champion with crazy high performance numbers, but a low enough play rate that Riot refuses to nerf him. His laning phase is good against literally every marksman in the game. The burst from his combo with just basic abilities does a ton of damage, and follow-up from any support can easily secure a kill as early as level 3. As the game goes on, it just gets worse for the enemy bot lane, and when you have your ultimate, there's nothing that they can really do. Even kill lanes can't do much as long as it's up. With the bonus HP making it nearly impossible to burst you down fully, the subsequent draining effect allows you to heal through their damage, all the while you're doing a ridiculous amount of damage yourself. In team fights, Swain has insane damage output as long as his ultimate is running, but anytime it's not up, he's basically useless aside from making picks with his E and passive. So with that in mind, when your ultimate is on cooldown, avoid fights at all costs. Following up on our carries, we'll start off with our supports with Seraphine. Her W is just an insane enabling ability, and she has a huge potential for huge CC chain and teamfights on her own, which is only made stronger when layered with her allies. She's definitely been hit with a lot of nerfs since release, but if you can make it into the later stages of the game, she's still incredibly strong, arguably the best support in the game. She was definitely struggling for several patches this season, but that was because a lot of the aggressive supports were in the meta. Those champions have since been nerfed, and she's slowly been rising back to the top. And with her getting a buff to her Q damage this patch, she's only gonna go higher. Said buff isn't gonna make her some insane lane bully, but with how much you have to spam the ability, it will definitely make a difference in how much pressure you can apply to the enemy bot laner over the course of the laning phase. Personally, I'm not that glad that she's seeing a lot of love. I don't really care for her. But if you disagree, feel free to let me know in the comments down below. Our second support pick is Sona. The vast majority of players call Seraphine Sona 2.0, and there are definitely a lot of similarities. Both are music-based, both have a lot of AoE heals, shields, and movement speed increases, and their ultimates are at least somewhat similar. But there are definitely distinguishing things from the champions. First of all, when it comes to actual support abilities, Seraphine just has one, her W. The rest of her kit is basically that of a mage. With Sona, all three basic abilities are buffs to your allies. Seraphine also has a really long cooldown on her W, while Sona's abilities are a lot more spammable. While Seraphine's W, especially when echoed, can be huge in negating a big AoE damage threat like Hearthus or Vladimir ultimates, Sona's spammable heals and shields are much more suited for smaller bits of damage over time, like Teemo streams or enemy poke champions like Ezreal. Sona also has one huge bonus in her W's power chord. It's honestly one of the most underrated abilities in the game. A lot of Sona players just auto with whatever power chord is available, but if you're aware enough to hold back your auto until you can cycle into your W, the damage reduction is immense. This can easily save one of your backliners, yourself included, from an otherwise certain death against a diving bruiser or assassin. One more thing to consider is the difference in their ultimates. Yes, Seraphines can travel a huge distance if you keep tagging champions with it, but Sona's ultimate goes out a lot faster. When trying to wombo combo with your team, or even just trying to engage on your own, the quicker ultimate can sometimes be much more effective than Seraphine's, which has a much more telegraphed cast. Finishing off our list, we have Zilean. While we often talk about how ridiculously strong Lulu is, Zilean is maybe the one champion that is better than her at enabling a single teammate. The reason that he isn't as OP of a pick is because of his weaker early game, but once you get out of the laning phase and start working with the rest of your team, he comes online really fast. He synergizes especially well with any diving champion, with his E allowing them to easily reach the enemy backline. If you're sending in a squishy assassin, you can throw your ultimate on and then just zoom them in. They'll be able to burst down a squishy enemy target, and your ultimate will prevent the enemy team from ever treating back the kill. As they revive, the rest of your team can move in and help them escape after they're brought back to life or just win the 5v4. And Zilean isn't just good at enabling divers. The movement speed from his E can help an ADC or a mage reposition for more damage or to kite enemy threats, or you can swap his targets to the enemy team using his E to massively slow them. TLDR, he works super well with and against all types of bruisers and assassins in the meta. So if you want a scaling pick that enables the rest of your team to do the carrying for you, he's a champion for you. And that is it for our top 3 champions to main on patch 11.14. If you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did, be sure to sub to never miss out on our meta guides so you're always in the loop on what the best picks are. Remember to let us know what champion you hate playing against and why down in the comments below. And one last thing, we're doing an RP giveaway. If you're interested, all you have to do is sub to the channel and join our Discord. You can find that link down in the description box below. Can't wait to see you guys back in the next video, but until then, stay safe, stay healthy, and have a wonderful day. Peace.